What's up, YouTube? It's the long-awaited 1.2.0 variation of HegeBurns, and I wanted to share with you my experience with this character. I've played a lot of different builds, and to be honest, this has probably been one of the more powerful builds, especially for how much costs. This character died in Beyond League, as you can see. Slash deaths. It's only died one time. That death video you can find in the links below. There's a rip video. It was in a shrine with a skelly, powerful crits, extra damage, turbo, things like that. It was a sad, sad death, but nonetheless, it wasn't a fault of the characters, the build, or the gear. It was just bad play. I was smooth sailing, steamrolling, solo, pretty much solo mapping, sustaining my own way, but it was a really, really amazing build. If I had to do it again in another league, this is probably what I would start with again. It's very, very cheap in costs, and you can always start, at the cheapest and get, better and better and better gear and actually feel the difference. There's a lot of builds out there, especially like non-crit builds or builds that have a very low ceiling, and they feel good when you're leveling up, but then they start to pan off. This is not one of those builds. This build just feels very, very powerful, and I want to show you some of the tools and explain to you why it's so great. So a couple of facts. I did level with Tabula Rasa until like level 84, so it was a very extremely viable build, probably one of the best builds to run with a Tabula, and you have a lot of resources in the skill tree, both life and resist, to make up for the stat loss, because your chest piece inherently has a huge stat weight when it comes to your distribution. I have a link to some of the gear in its earlier stages and an upgraded stage, so we'll take a look at some of the gear in a little bit. I'm going to explain to you what layers of defense this character has before we get into the offense. So you ask yourself, well, he's not running Grace, he doesn't have IR, but I don't need it. Honestly, I have 266 armor. I had no problems with my tankiness. Oh, it's only a 2% damage reduction. I had 1480 evasion, so 16% chance to evade. My life regen is actually 152 base, but I'll show you this number in just a second and how it goes up with the build. My mana regen is very, very strong because I have Eldritch Battery, I run Clarity, I have 3.5 over 3.5k mana, total mana. My all resists are outstanding. 81 all res. I'm over the cap, so even with Ellie weak and stuff, I mean, I'm not capped with Ellie weak, but it does help. Cold resist 75, lightning resist 75. I am weak against chaos resist because this guy died on like day 4 of Beyond League at level 90, and I mean, chaos resist is just hard and expensive to budget. This is this is like the bread and butter of the build, the block chance. And if I had a Rumi's concoction, I would gladly replace it for this. But I didn't have it, and I was not that rich at that time. I think Rumi's at the point of this character's death was worth like 7 exalts, 5 to 7. But I do have a 32% passive block chance and a 29% spell block. So on top of having max resist and having spell block and having Arctic armor, and the way Arctic armor works is that it gives you a flat reduction, both physical and fire damage, but it does cost mana degen, and it costs more mana if you move. But notice my mana regen is so good that I don't even lose mana. Most people, when they start moving with Arctic armor, they'll start to degen and eventually go and then it'll turn off. So mana regen is the main focus of sustaining Arctic armor, and I could run a level 21 with no problems. I could almost run a half regen map at my current Arctic armor. I had to do some toggling, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, so going on with the layer of defense, you say, how do you survive with no armor, especially with all these scary beyond mobs? And I've done this all pre-nerf, so I know it succeeds. So you go up, and I'm using Blood Dance boots. So I have 3 frenzy charges, and you ask, how are you getting frenzy charges? That was an LE reflect pack, and you see me take no damage because of Arctic armor. So I have 4 frenzy charges, and now we take a look at my life regen. 362 life regen. So even though I only have a 5.2k HP pull, which is not, which is a lot to have at the beginning of the league, I take no damage. Like, this fire breath is barely anything because of Arctic armor. Arctic armor is good at mitigating small, rapid, hits, both physical and fire damage. Once you get outside that threshold, then you start to experience a lot more damage. But as long as the hits stay low, you take like none. It's just, think of World of Warcraft block value. Back in the day when it used to have block value, it doesn't have that anymore. But it used to be like a flat amount that you mitigated every time you blocked. Yeah, I didn't have Arctic armor on, so that was the dogs without it. I'm gonna go show you what it looks like against the Cells boss, which a lot of the times wrecks people. So we're gonna put up AA, and we're gonna just face tank the Cells boss. I don't want to kill the boss, I just want to kill his minions. Alright, so here we go. Fire breathing dog. I'm taking no damage. This guy is pretty scary for most people, but this is AA at its finest. I'm going to turn off AA, and you're going to see how much damage I'm taking. I'm going to have to actually pot for this. You see that damage? But as soon as I turn on AA, I'll actually start healing, because it's mitigating all of it. So you can see how strong Arctic armor will be against both Void Bearers and Titty Bitches. Okay, so what do you do against bosses? Since I'm so good at AoEing, how do you go with dealing with bosses with high HP? Now, the answer is very, very simple. You see in my links, I have LE Prolif, Increased Burn, and Fire Pen. And without extra mobs in the background, there's not any real help to increase your single target damage. So you pull out the LE Prolif gem, and you substitute it for Conk Effect. So I always carry Conk Effect on the side as a boss killer, because you get that more area multiplier. So you saw me do a full charge Flame Blast on the guy earlier. I'm not going to put a curse on this guy. I'm just going to do it with Conk Effect straight up. And you can see how potent it is at taking down bosses. So when you get to your bosses, this is what I highly recommend. Swap out your LE Prolif, because it's not going to do much. It's not going to do anything other than that increased ignite duration. And if you don't have extra mobs to give you the best number, and like what I mean by that is, say you have 10 mobs, what LE Prolif does, it takes your best hit and distributes that among the players instead of the enemies, instead of taking each individual hit or whatever, having it at different values. So that's one of the strengths of LE Prolif. So while it might be a good AoE build, it's a simple swap, simple shield swap, and keep leveling it. Quality Conk Effect does not matter because it's reduced mana cost, and honestly, like, once you get to this state, the mana problems are no more. Alright, so now that we've talked about the layers of defense, how do you deal with the physical damage? And I'll tell you, I have self-cast Enduring Cry with Echo, and this is a staple that I use in most, if not all, my builds in some fashion. I use a self-cast Enduring Cry to give me maximum number of charges, whatever they may be at that time, and then I have a cast on damage taken, increased duration, Immortal Call with the Decoy Totem. This is also another layer of defense that adds to my character. So I chose to level up my cast and damage taken to 10, because when I do take physical hits, they're going to be hard since I am pretty much an armorless character. 266 pretty much constitutes as you're an armorless character. Let's be real. Okay, so the increased duration you can level up to 2020 because it's not held by the level restriction since it's a support gem and not a skill gem. So casting damage taken limits the skill gem. So you see it says requires level 49. My Immortal Call is below that threshold. It's level 48. So I'm using a max quality Immortal Call because the quality is not affected, and quality on Immortal Call is like some of the best quality you can get on any gem. And then I'm using Decoy Totem. So every time my casting damage taken goes off, it'll exchange my Echoed Enduring Cry, which is 3 charges, and then it'll turn it into a pretty decent sized Immortal Call. And I'll show you. I have a 3-second endurance charge. When casting damage goes off, I have a 5-second Immortal Call. So whenever I go into rooms and it seems kind of sketch, like I'm gonna get leaped on or charged, I immediately just hit that global, and it's a very fast cast. See, like that endurance charge goes off. Next thing that hits me physically is going to proc my immunity, and then I'm good for 5 seconds. Like I can just tank here. Not to mention that there's a decoy to, you know, taunt some more hits. So it gives me a lot of breathing room. Overall, the combined Arctic armor, the passive block, the high life regen, and the max res all spiral and make this character feel very, very tanky. I highly recommend, regardless of what character, especially armorless characters, you run the self-cast Enduring Cry and casting damage taken Immortal Call. There are a few characters where I actually self-cast Immortal Call. Those will come in other guides later, but you can see how potent this is. This is a 73 map, and I'm going around, and these prolif rings last forever. These essentially are like turrets or beacons of damage. Anything that comes near just gets crushed. The more mobs the more number of mobs there are, keep in mind I'm not cursing, the more damage potential there is because it's taking the highest hit and spreading that. So these guys are fire alchemists. I'm using Arctic armor, so I'm extremely tanky against this, on top of having spell block and max fire res. A lot of the threats in this game tend to be fire damage. In Beyond League, we are seeing a cold trend. There are lots of cold snapping, ice spears, things like that that are new threats of raid class. But this is without curse. And my last layer of defense is the dual curse. I'm using Dodri's Damning, which gives me an additional curse. And because of that, I've always chosen to go Enfeeble, so I can actually evade their hits, and their damage is reduced regardless if it's spell or attack. So you see how that decoy just takes off a lot of the heat, and then I'm able to sit there and cast. And then I use the flammability for that ignite chance, that minus res. It's my offensive one. And the reason why I chose Enfeeble, because we were dealing with a lot of unavoidable damage. And by that I mean like the Chaos Aura from the Flicker Strikers. And the Enfeeble actually suppresses the amount of degen damage that you actually take. So I use Enfeeble and Flammability as my dual curse. And it's very easy. You just, I cast so fast, you barely even notice my gameplay being affected. It's just ET and then start casting Flame Blast. Very, very potent build. The area is very good, and you can start this build with the Tabula Rasa no problem. I'll show you some of the defensive tips that you can go on with the tree. Alright, so Prolif Rings, pretty amazing. Very good for missions, getting turrets. This actually excels in a lot of map mods that people don't even run. So let's discuss map mods. What is this build powerful against? In my opinion, it's the most powerful build against Fracture. because as soon as you attack mobs, them splitting, you already have the proliferation rings down, and since they have reduced HP when they respawn, it just completely nullifies that threat. One thing that I will say, when you are running fracture maps, you have to be careful for things like porcupines. And overall, the porcupines do physical damage. However, when you have a map with monster damage with added lightning or added cold, if added fire, it doesn't really matter, because as long as the damage stays low, your Arctic armor is going to take care of all of that, all the physical damage. Plus, on top of that, you can run Enduring Cry right before porcupines die, so that when they do explode, that you take no damage. You either block, evade, or use Arctic armor, and you have other stuff. You could use Rumi's Concoction, or in my case, I have a Granite Skin, which is supplemental armor for a period of time. I have 6,140 armor with just this flask. That's definitely decent and helps me be tankier overall. These curse flasks are always important. I always go double curse with any one of my characters. You guys know this, because rolling curse immunity is probably one of the most important things and one of the #1 killers. Taking your resist down below a dangerous threshold and taking a burst amount of damage will end your character without a doubt. Shock stacking is less of a problem these days, because you cannot get triple shock stack anymore. So while it does do 50% increased damage, I do have one still, because there's still a lot of chaos damage. Taking a shock stack and then taking the chaos degen auras does hurt quite a bit when you have -40 chaos resistance. I did supplement a lot of life regen to help deal, because I knew in the beginning of the league chaos damage was going to be extremely hard to get. Alright, so the bandit rewards. Let's talk about the bandit rewards. Oak, that's a no-brainer. The second one, I took a skill point. And you ask, why did you take a skill point instead of 4% cast speed? Well, because there's 4% cast speed here, and these nodes, frankly, are the nodes that I spec in and out of all the time. So I figure 4% cast speed is more flexible in case you need to get to that one notable that you're like just so close to getting. And I mean, it would suck to be like right here and be so close to Eldritch Battery, but since you didn't pick up Eldritch Battery, you couldn't run Arctic Armor, and therefore you died to Void Bearers. I didn't want that situation to happen. So skill point, moving in and out of cast speed. There's even cast speed wheels here that I could pick up. There's no shortage of cast speed that I have a shortage of talent points. In fact, that was the case. So skill point was the easy choice for me. And then the third choice is where it's debatable. If you want to go Blood Dance, and the reason why I use Blood Dance is because this character suffers from a major dex problem. Without these Blood Dance boots, all my gear would pretty much break. Like I couldn't even wear a Carcass Jack. Oh, great. So what do these Blood Dance offer? They offer 40 dex, they offer evasion, they offer 20% movement speed. I knew I was able, since this was my first character, I knew I was going to be able to get these for cheap off the bat. The main kicker here is that it gives me a 30% chance to gain a frenzy charge on kill. This is the most important thing. So 30% of the time I get a kill, regardless of it igniting and degenning, it will reward me with a frenzy charge. Now, what do these frenzy charges do? Normally, it just gives you 5% cast speed, just base, and attack speed. But in this case, since I'm using Blood Dance, it's giving me 2% movement speed per frenzy charge, and with 4 frenzy charges, that means it's going to give you 8. However, it has a drawback: reduce the attack and cast speed per frenzy charge. So it normally gives you 5, so it's going to now net you 2. So having 4 frenzy charges is now going to give you 8% cast speed. Cast speed is godly when you have Flame Blast and Spell Echo, because Echo is a more multiplier on your cast speed. It's like the multi-strike of casting. Now we have another effect. This is probably one of the more important defensive layers that I put on. This is 1% life regeneration per second per frenzy charge. This gives me 4% life regen. That's how you are able to see me at 350 life per second in that docks. Upon getting frenzy charges, I'm like Very, very good on the regen, and it doesn't put that much pressure on like my other defenses when I can regen that fast. Let me get these back on. Okay, so let's just go through the rest of my gear. These Blood Dance boots I think cost me like 3 chaos, and they were very, very, very cheap. Let's see if I can put these back on. I need to put on another dex item. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I didn't expect. There's a ring. There you go. All right, so let's talk about let's talk about my gear and my gems. Blood Dance boots, dirt cheap, dirt cheap. These are actually perfect ones. 40 dex and 30 frenzy charge and kill. The range goes from 20 to 30. This belt is pretty godly. I paid like almost, I think I paid 1.5x for this. This maximum energy shield gives me mana because I'm using stuff like Eldritch Battery right here. Eldritch Battery converts all energy shield to mana. So it's like a mana, health, a little bit of armor, good res, amazing, amazing leather belt. Probably one of the more expensive items on this character. And then I had these Legion gloves, which I actually found, which also gave me a dex boost, preventing me from having to get dex on the tree. Also very nice. This is just life dual res. Nothing too special. I crafted extra armor and energy shield for that extra mana boost and extra armor. Any little, you know, it was only like 3 alks or something cheap, ridiculously cheap. Wrath Pith, I did pay 4.5 exalts, and then I ended up finding one 30 minutes later. So this was a very, very expensive at the time. Now I believe they've gone significantly down in price. The energy shield gives me 221, which converts that into mana. The main thing with this shield is the block chance is 30% base, which is nice. And then the 2 modifiers, the spell damage and the increased block chance applied to spells. So it converts whatever block chance you have and adds it to spell block, so that you can hybridize your block chance instead of going Saphils where you go 120% or however many percent. I think it's 75 or 80. But now you have both attack and spell block. With Saphils you can only spell block, but it excels in the spell block. I wanted to be tanky against both. We have increased life, energy shield, and lightning resistance. Overall, god tier shield for any flame blast burner. This is like the go-to thing. I do not need Rise of the Phoenix. A lot of people ask me, why don't you use Rise of the Phoenix so you don't die to Reflect? Because I have Arctic armor, Reflect does nothing against me. The fact that Arctic armor mitigates, right now it mitigates 171 fire damage per hit. My upfront payload is not that high because I'm not crit based. Look at my tooltip. It's 1026 per stage. So it's very, very small, and Arctic armor is almost able to mitigate all of the reflect that I receive in maps. This is referring to the rare reflect mod, not the actual map mod. The map mod is still 18%. The mod inside maps on rares is 14%. So I can fully charge a flame blast on 10 mobs with Ellie Reflect and not take any damage because of Arctic armor. It mitigates every one of the reflect hits through Arctic armor. So if there's 10 hits, I'm going to mitigate up to, or if there's 10 mobs, I'm going to mitigate up to 1710 damage just through Arctic armor. So this is what some of the layers of defense that I have to be immune to reflect. And going crit based flame blast or having conk effect in your flame blast is definitely going to be a risk when you have reflect. But overall, I fired into at least 30 to 40 full packs with full flame blast charge, and I didn't even come anywhere close to dying. The key is to run a high level Arctic armor. Now, what would I say is best in slot weapon? Obviously, this is not anything special. I do recommend Doriani's mace, the Atsiri mace. That is by far the best because it's elemental damage that scales both the burn and the initial hit. Spell damage is nice because it increases the spell skill, but it doesn't affect the burn. It doesn't double dip. So while spell damage is going to multiply, you know, with the 208 to 313 fire damage, the burn damage is not modified by spell damage. So ultimately, you would want something with elemental damage, which is the same as fire damage, except elemental damage does more. It does cold and added lightning. If you wanted to use added lightning or added cold, you could scale it with elemental damage. However, you don't want to ever use cold. People always ask me, why don't you use Herald of Ice with this? Because when you crit ice, you shatter. And when you shatter, you do not burn proliferate. So every mob that you shattered would not spread the rings. And that's the whole point of the build, is to scale damage via proliferation rings and not upfront damage. Alright, so we went over the gloves and the defense inside it. We went over the belt, the boots, the carcass jack. This was a very obvious choice. Now, if I was dealing with different elemental spells like lightning or cold, I would probably seek the comforts of a Cloak of Defiance, because it gives me mind over matter. And Arctic Armor doesn't work against cold and lightning, so the mana suppression or the mana exchange would help your reflect situations. Wrathpith is something I would always go to as self-cast caster build. And then your evasion energy shield. The evasion is nice. If you have low amounts of armor, it's great to evade the hit entirely. I have 16% chance to evade, don't forget that. And then the energy shield gives me more mana to fuel my mana regen and my Arctic armor. The all resist, the life, area, radius, all this stuff is just god tier for what you need to do. Increasing the radius of Flame Blast, it simulates it casting faster. What it doesn't actually cast, it doesn't get you into the stages faster, but it does make the ring bigger quicker. So you see how this number is going from 1 to 10? Cast speed is going to drastically increase the rate of how fast I get to 10, but radius is going to increase how fast it'll expand. So both cast speed and radius will affect how it looks visually and how far it expands. Only cast speed is going to take it to the quicker stages. Dodra's Damning, this I paid 3 chaos for this. This was cheap. The Carcass Jack at the time, I paid, I want to say 2.5 exalts for it. It's much cheaper now. I think you can get these for like an X now. Oops. This is the ring I was using. I actually crafted this, Hege crafting. So I use an alch. It did all my needs. Life gain on kill was nice because it helped me heal when I was doing fractures, or this life gain on kill was kind of like a hidden gem bonus. But it gave me int, which is ES, percent ES, mana, flat, mana, life, more ES, cold res, just resistance ring and stats. The necklace was very nice. This is also Hege crafted. Alch this, got spell damage, cast speed, life, mana regen. Mana regen is a god tier item when your mana pool is very high. There's a certain balancing act that mana regen becomes extremely powerful. It's very weak when your mana pools are very low. Once your mana pools get like in the 2.5, 3k range, mana regen, any amount of mana regen you get on gear, it feels insane. It feels it's because it's percentage based. A percentage of a small number is a small number, but a percentage of a big number is like massive. So wherever you can get mana regen is amazing. That's why I got this on this weapon. This weapon I paid, I want to say I paid around 15 to 20 chaos for. It facilitated cast speed, which gets multiplied by my spell echo. That spell damage, which is the upfront flame blast damage, and then the mana regen, again making my mana regeneration god tier. As far as a helmet, this is a hybridized energy shield. It's mainly just a life, double res, and then I crafted a third res. So try res helmet with life. I actually found this one in a map and then I crafted it. So it didn't cost me much. Overall, very cheap and very sustainable. I do recommend that you get one piece with at least armor on it so that you can make a 4-link with 4 reds very easily. Otherwise, chroming is going to become a pain in the ass. the gem that I used least of was the green gem. You only theoretically need one for Arctic armor. I used detonate dead there because I was using to clear up boxes for the exploding ones. Speaking of boxes, that's a good question. How do you open boxes with this character? Since I don't use smoke mine or anything like that, lightning warp is way too fast. I was finding that when I was actually trying to click it and lightning warp at the same time, it would just not click because it was just too fast. So what I would always do when I got to a box is I would just pull out the reduced mana, I would warp and then click, warp and then click. So very, very easy, guaranteed way of getting away. And as soon as I warped away, you know, the first thing I did was Enduring Cry, so that I was prepared for whatever the box might have had, you know, whether it be chargers, you know, archers, anything. Now what I would do if there was a box and the mobs were overall scary, or it said freeze, right? Freeze upon opening. I would actually go around, find mobs like that weren't around the box, get my 3 endurance charges, and then do the process. So as soon as I warped, I was frozen over here, but I had 3 endurance charges. So if there were like Roa charges, then I would immediately get Immortal Called and I would be safe. So multiple things to take care of my box module or whatever, however you want to say it. Okay, so we've gone over the helmet, we've gone over the necklace. The shield is God tier. The off slots, I was just leveling up gems. None of this. The main important off slot is Conk Effect, and I guess if you wanted to have Detonate Dead on a swap, you could also use that. As for Val skills, I use Val Summon Skellies. This is actually another 7th layer of defense that I have on my character. Val Summon Skellies. It's like Army of the Dead. And whenever I was taking a lot of threats from a Beyond Moss or Merveil or things like that, I would get so much DPS uptime just by like, I wish I could spawn a boss in here, but I can't since this character died and it's on standard. But this is pretty much an aggro disturbance. It'll absorb sparks. I mean, it'll do a lot of different things. But I used Val Summon Skellies for that oh shit button. You know, we have a boss. But I did every single boss. I didn't skip a single thing. I did every single what do you call it, mission. I never skipped anything. Like, I attempted everything, and as far as bosses go, I'm like 100% success rate. I have never had to skip a single Beyond unique. This is actually my, you know, boss killer. Getting that Conk Effect. There is one of them that cannot be ignited. He is kind of annoying. So, but all I did was, and he does the Summon Raging Spirits. All I did was kite him and swap for Ellie Prolif with Conk Effect, and eventually, like, you take him down with ease. So, I mean, defense after defense, you know, cooldown, on-demand cooldowns. These are all great tools. You could probably substitute Val or Detonate Dead for some other skill that you prefer. Again, this was a very fast-paced, very successful end game, clearing 77, 78 maps like it's a joke, like complete jokes. If you want to see more gameplay footage, I believe my VODs are still on Twitch TV, but definitely one of the more powerful builds. Now, the question that gets asked a lot: how in the hell did you go about leveling this character? So we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna walk you down the skill tree from the get-go via the PoE skill tree. How did I prioritize at the very beginning of the league? This is with having nothing, mind you. Like, you could do this differently now because you could buy a lot of cheap gear very easily. Okay. Skill tree. So follow along. I'll tell you exactly how I leveled up. So I went elemental damage, and I went to amplify first. I got greedy. Like, in the very beginning in normal, you don't really need anything. Good micro goes a long way. Then I actually went for Celestial Walker. So this is the start. because the all res was kind of nice. You want to get to that phase, you know, at least by Merveil. So moving along, immediately start to go towards this reduced mana, because at lower levels, by the way, I was using Ice Nova, since you don't get Flame Blast until after you kill Brutus. So Ice Nova, if you find a fire trap, use it. Reduced mana cost was definitely helping with the clear speed. Ice Nova is very expensive. You're just constantly chugging pots. And then Prestidigitation, the cast speed and mana regen, that is an excellent, excellent skill for both Flame Blast and Ice Nova. Once I got Prestidigitation, I proceeded to move into Discipline and Training, get some more life. And then I actually started to move out from this point. After I got this Templar cookie cutter, you know, safe life wheel, I think I cheated my way out and then respec later. But I want to say I went like this, Weapon Ellie, even though these do absolutely nothing for my character. It was the fastest way to get to athleticism. So I went up, got Elementalist, because both Elementalist is elemental damage, which is just as good, if not better, than fire damage when you're using other things. And since my proliferation was pretty poop at this point, you could choose to use Herald of Ice if you wanted to. Some people do that because your chance to ignite was poop, so you just were all about the raw upfront damage anyways. After this, I beelined it to these Ignite nodes. Ignite Chance, I got that really, really quickly. Got the Burn and Holy Fire. Now this is, at this point, I believe I was using Flame Blast and Chance to Ignite. That was my only 2 link. I was using Flame Blast on a 1 link for a very, very long time. Okay, so I got Holy Fire. Then I believe I proceeded to, actually, you know what? I didn't go out this way. I went out this way. So after so I did go out this way to get athleticism first, but you could just come out this way up the top side instead of getting these Weapon Ellie nodes. So by this point, I used 2 regrets to get these and then come out. Now I'm actually beelining it for these nodes. I come up over to Witch. Oh, actually, no, I actually didn't do that. Sorry. Nix that. I actually go down for better stat distribution to get more strength. And then I actually get Elemental Dominion. You know what? Actually, I didn't do that. I apologize. I actually did respec again. So I actually went up this way so I could beeline it to these fire nodes. That's exactly what I did. Then after I got Breath of Flames, now because this is the 5% chance to ignite duration, this is this is probably one of my favorite caster wheels in general. This right side rewards the hard-hitting fire damage self-cast. The ignite duration on enemies, 15% chance to ignite, giving you a total of 20 just from the tree. And then using the chance to ignite gem, I was igniting very, very often. Okay, so from this point, I went over and I got the area nodes. Blast radius, I moved over. Eventually, I'm going to respec these. You'll see, because I'm about to come around. I may have, after this area node, I may have gone up this way to get Deep Thoughts, because I was having, I wanted to have less mana problems. And I was running Clarity at this point, and I think only Clarity. So I go down, pick up Deep Wisdom. I got Deep Wisdom, went to Practical Application. This was better stat distribution because I was having a lot of problems with dexterity, picking up gear, finding gear that I couldn't equip because I didn't have enough dex. And my gear was shit because I was like running self-found, you know, pretty much at the start of the league with, you know, slim pickings. So I go for these Avoid Interruptions, which is very, very nice for Flame Blast. And I got Elemental Dominion. I think from this point is when I respect out of these points right here. So at some point I went like this and I took these out. Again, for better stat distribution and future travel. I got Firewalker almost immediately, giving you that fire resist and 18% fire damage. So I was pretty much done with this the witch area for a while, right? That's how I left it. Now I'm like, okay, I still need more mana regen and more life. Come down this way, pick up these life nodes right here and life regen, making me very, very tanky, making me, you know, able to deal with, you know, the hardships of Beyond and its crazy Beyond monsters. And then I got Shaper. Okay, so after Shaper, I'm looking pretty good on life, mana regen. After Shaper, I believe. Okay, after Shaper, that's when I went over here for more life, Chaos Resistance, and Purity of Flesh. So I finally filled out that wheel. Okay, now I think I started making it for. As soon as I got Purity of Flesh, I went for Heart and Soul for more life and mana. And then I started to come out towards Eldritch Battery. I believe that's when I went for Eldritch Battery. And I believe this was around Merciless Act 2. After that, we proceed towards the Scion Life Wheel. And I pick up Constitution like almost ASAP. Now I think I was running a level 8 Arctic Armor for a long time, 6 or 8, because my gear just absolutely blew, like it blew chunks. So I wasn't really worried about scaling my Arctic Armor. I already had athleticism, that 5% increased buff effect, along with Inner Force. Those buff your armor, your Arctic Armor. But I don't think I touched Inner Force yet because I knew there was no point in scaling it when it was already super, super low. So I proceeded just to go for more life. So there is a long travel to get to this node, Barbarism, which gives you +1 max fire res. So at this point, I'm just filling up the Scion Life Wheel, feeling very, very tanky. And it actually takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 points. So I spec'd into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then by the time I leveled up, right, I have 7. So I removed all these with my respec points. And I traveled with the 7 to get Barbarism. I think at this point I accumulated enough currency and enough, what do you call it? Enough gear to support an AA. So either I started going towards more life, or I think I got Inner Force at this point after I had got received Barbarism. So after Barbarism, I went back towards to filling out the Scion Life Wheel. Keep in mind I was using Tabula Rasa, so I wanted to get as much life as possible, and pretty much facilitated the build. After I got the Scion Life Wheel, I went block. I think I had achieved Wrathpith Globe, and Wrathpith is going to scale regular block into spell block, so I started picking up these block nodes. These are spell block exclusive nodes, but this also helped with Reflect. And I didn't want to use these nodes or this wheel until I could actually utilize Energy Shield on Shield. 30% Energy Shield from equipped from Shield. If you're using like a 40 ES Shield, this node is absolute shit. But if you're using Wrathpith, this is actually going to give you a substantial amount of mana. So I went to Mind Barrier, and ultimately this is how my tree panned out. If I had kept on leveling, what I would have done was I would have come down into this way, Born to Fight, and I'm using a Wrathpith at this point and getting more block. So you would be able to facilitate 7% more block. You get 40% more ES from Shield. And then I would go Warrior's Blood. And as I was doing that, I would be pulling out of Scion Life Wheel to go up into Warrior, Heart of the Warrior. Get these Marauder life nodes, which are more efficient. These are 6s. So I would have respect out of those, kept Constitution, of course, and then moved my way into this. So that was ultimately the plan of going across and over. And this would have been the HegeBurns. So a lot of the nodes that I tinkered with, going back and forth, were this half Scion Wheel and then these Caspi nodes. you get 12% cast speed per point. These are probably the ones that I abused the most. Those cast speed, I was in and out until I could hit an actual notable. I was like, I'm not gonna travel. But this would be assuming that I lived, you know, into the 90s and stuff. Unfortunately, I died at 90, 29th on the ladder and beyond. Overall, I mean, I was really happy with the character. This is probably one of the most OP things that I played for, you know, making it out of nothing. Going in a fresh economy, that's always puts your build to the test at how efficient it is in the low and higher levels. Like, so many times you make a character and it just feels like poop because you get to the maps and then all of a sudden you can't do damage anymore, or it's taking like 15 casts or 10 strikes just to kill a white mob. So HegeBurns is something that didn't punish you for those really potent proliferation rings, because there's no reflect on burning prolif. There's only reflect on the upfront damage, and since this build focused on the burn and not the upfront, it was just amazing. So let's talk about some of the transitions with the gems, because this gets all the time. What is your gem setup? And it's a constantly changing dynamic. You start out with let me see if I have one on me. Anyways, you start out with Flame Blast, right? You get the chance to ignite. That's your 2-link for a long time. And then after that, you add in, you usually get a fire pen from a quest, so you can now run it on a 3-link with chance to ignite. This is if you go self-found. Obviously there could be better choices. Increased burn is amazing if you can get quality. Now after that, I would 4-link prolif. This is how I would do it: fire pen, LE prolif, flame blast, and chance to ignite. Once you get a quality flame blast, look at the quality on flame blast. 30% chance to ignite at 20%. Fix my screen. Okay, sorry. Thank you for that. This is the 4-link. Once you get with a chance to ignite, it's not here. I wish I had it, but it's somewhere on one of my characters. Once you get the 20% flame blast, you have a 30% chance to ignite. Your chance to ignite is roughly around 43% at level, I think, 17, 18, or 19, something like that. So it almost negates the fact of needing chance to ignite. I feel like the transition from going from using chance to ignite to not is around 40 to 45% chance. So once you have achieved 40% chance on your tooltip, chance to ignite on your tooltip, I would go ahead and pull out chance to ignite and use increased burn damage or spell echo. Now, increased burn damage quality is the second most important quality gem in this build, because it also gives you 10% chance to ignite. So combined with a 20% flame blast and a 10% increased burn, that's 40% total just from the 2 gems. You pull out the 43% chance to ignite, and then you add in another more potent link. So on a 5-link, I was running Spell Echo, Fire Pen, LE Prolif. If I were to add a 6th link, it would actually be faster casting. That would have been the 6th link, which I have done before. If you go through my Gorge speedruns, I was running a HegeBurns build, and I think I achieved, what, 208 or 215, something like that, some insane clear speed with that build. But the 6th link, which I never really got, was faster cast. So you cast extremely fast on that Flame Blast. But that is the gems in a nutshell of how it came to be. Increased duration, enfeeble, flammability. I'm dual curse, and I'm not looking to constantly refresh, you know, my curses. I'm just trying to get as many casts. So stuff like fighting Merveil or something with LOS, the torture chamber boss, was very easy, since my ignition damage was the bulk of, you know, how the build worked. I could just afford to use a conk effect, flame blast, and then go hide behind a pillar and let that ignite just do its work with the dual curse. So I could go off screen and say, let's what is the boss, torture chamber boss, whatever her name was, with the conk effect. Let's change that. So I would do one of these. She would be dual curse off screen. Like, I would get her on the edge, do this, and then I would just wait behind the pillar. And most times I could just one-shot one Flame Blast with a Conk Effect, and Dual Curse was enough to take her down. So you know, the ability to continually do damage for a prolonged period of time and be LOS and completely safe is amazing. Also, say this is a doorway, and say these are just walls. Mobs that actually hide behind a doorway, you see how my Flame Blast is going behind it? That was also an important tool when you had like Substantial Fizz, Crit Totem, Porcupines in here. You know, if you were to go in here and just do this without like Immortal Call or an Echo, you would just die. So it was a easy way to get like discharges to explode away from me and keep myself and my character safe. I think that is so. Map mobs that you want to avoid: Enfeeble and fire resistant. Temp change is something I'll always avoid on every character, in my opinion. But Enfeeble, it definitely required more of a curse. I mean, you don't have to skip Enfeeble on maps that were Enfeeble that didn't have damage mods. This is why I had Ellie weakness in here. I would double DPS curse, or you know, those Zayna missions where they're fire resistant. Now, you know, not being able to put Enfeeble on mobs does put your character at more risk, like with those scary Beyond mobs. But you know, sometimes you just gotta man mode it, and that's you know, the reward that you take. But overall clear speed, those are the ones that hinder you the most. Equilibrium is actually not that bad of a map mod because it doesn't nerf your very first hit. So as long as you're going full blast and you're cursing beforehand, like if you're gonna constantly, you know, do this and not curse, Equilibrium is not gonna feel that good, because as soon as you land the first hit, the next hit is gonna get resisted by 50%. So Equilibrium is actually not too bad. If you get good mods with an Equilibrium, just go ahead and run it. Make sure you just curse beforehand, and it shouldn't really hinder your clear speed all too much. So we've gone over the layers of defense, we've gone over the bandits, we've gone over the map mods. Overall, this guy is a beast. He could handle everything, all the Beyond mobs before pre-nerf. It was all done, self-found. You know, I didn't take any handouts, so there was no advantage. I did purchase gems, and I did purchase a few pieces of gear, but I did what's it called, buy items, very few items, and I didn't find a Carcass Shack until later, so I did buy the Carcass Shack. So I saved up and did it myself. If you guys were tuning in the stream at the very beginning of the league, you would have seen this whole process unfold, and it is doable. This is not like something only high level players can do. It's very, very cheap. Probably, at least in my opinion, top 3 starter builds in any league going on from here on out. Unless this gets nerfed substantially with the burn, I don't see this. I probably will start out with this next league. And the reason why I chose Templar over Marauder, or over Witch, EE is -50 to others and 25. Sorry, I misspoke. It was actually 25 resistance. That's why it doesn't hurt as much as 75 resistance on a map. 75 on maps just really, really blow. The starting nodes right here, I felt like were much better because elemental damage does double dip and spell damage does not. What does double dip mean with burn? So you have your increased fire damage, which increases the initial hit, and then that ignition chance, that bulk of that damage, is calculated over 4 seconds. But that is also multiplied again by your fire and elemental damage nodes. That's why elemental damage and fire damage is so much more superior than spell damage in a burn based build. Spell damage is only going to increase the upfront initial hit, but fire damage and elemental damage are going to dip twice. So if you hit for say your burn damage is 1,000, and you have 20% elemental damage or 20% fire damage, you're going to get 200% or 200 more damage over that period of time. So that's why I highly recommend fire damage and elemental damage nodes. What else is there? I believe that's it. I think I've covered everything in the build and the build guide and the transitions. Mainly, the main question I get is, how did you level it? Where should I go first? So we've covered that. The itemization, Doriani's best mace because it's pure elemental damage instead of spell damage, and it also has 1% leech, which is also very, very, very good. I want to avoid crits because when you do crit, the 5% chance that I do have. Where is it? I do have a 5% chance to crit, and when I do crit an Ellie Reflect pack, I think I get down to like 40 to 50% health after Arctic armor. So you do feel that. So it does get kind of scary when you do crit, but it's very, very rare that that will happen. All right, that's pretty much all I had to say. The flask definitely could have been improved, but this is a 4-day character, pretty insane. Thank you guys for listening to this guide. If you like this guide, hit the like button. Consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. I do have another character. It's called HegeBurns, and it's a multi-charge discharge avatar fire variation of what I'm doing with this guy. I'll make more guides with my Immortal Wukong janitor build that will come when I hit about like level 90-ish probably. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys later.